The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Depending on where you're logging in from, one of those will sound just about right. Welcome back to another great episode of our Best Practices webinar series with 7Signal. We see that thankfully a lot of you have logged on early today, so thank you for doing that. If you'd like to, please let us know where you're logging in from. If you are working from home today, if you're in the office, I myself am again back in the Cleveland headquarters office, and I'm joined again by Jim Vajda in Cincinnati. How are you today, Jim?
Very good. Good to be here, Kelsey.
Awesome. And I hear Cincinnati has actually gotten more snow than Cleveland, ironically enough, this week, which is very interesting.
We got our first and maybe our only big snow of the year. 6 inches of snow, which was just a total crisis here in the Cincinnati area.
Exactly. My parents have been joking with me. They said a couple weeks ago, you move up to Cleveland and the Cleveland Browns make the NFL playoffs, and then you move up there and we end up getting more snow than you guys. So it must be some sort of good luck charm or something. I don't know, but it's funny to hear that. All right. Thank
For
you
sure.
guys for logging in. I see Kenneth joining us from Denmark. Thank you, Kenneth, for joining us today. We see who else here. JJ joining us from Johannesburg. Thank you, JJ. Stephanie, freezing in Michigan. I empathize with that, Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you'd like to the rest of you, please keep dropping that in there, and we will go ahead and get started here. A really great topic today. We've garnered a lot of interest. Really excited to dive into this. What to expect from Wi-Fi 6E with Jim Vajda, as I mentioned, is our special guest today. Jim is our Chief Wireless Officer here at 7Signal and CWNE number 183. And again, I'm Kelsey Rizzuto, the Marketing Specialist here at 7Signal, and we will go ahead and move forward here. A couple of announcements before we dive in. Just bear with me here while we run through these points. We do partner with CWNP for every single one of our webinars. So if you are pursuing a certification and would like CE credits for attending today's webinar, go ahead and drop us a note and we can send you over a PDF certificate. Another note worth mentioning, 7Signal has recently been added to Synnex Corporation's GSA schedule. Moving forward here, we also post and host a Friday product tour every single Friday at 12 noon Eastern. So we will go ahead and drop the link in the chat here to register, go.7signal.com/tour. We also post all of our slides from each presentation to our Twitter account. So if you're on there, go ahead and give us a follow at 7Signal. And additionally, we do post all of our archived webinars to our YouTube channel. So today's broadcast recording will be up there later this afternoon. So go ahead and check that out, in addition to all of our previous webinars as well. But if you're not active on Twitter or YouTube, you all will be receiving a follow-up email for attending for today's webinar with both of these provided. Additionally, subscribe to our channel if you're able to. And an exciting announcement here as a thank you to attending all of our webinars this month. At the end of the month, we will be giving away an Oculus 2 to a very special attendee from this month. So stay tuned for more, and thank you for attending our webinars. And we look forward to you joining us in the future. Another exciting announcement, next week is finally our first virtual user group of 2021. So join us from 10:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. We have a really exciting lineup here. We're going to dive into the 7Signal product roadmap. And additionally, this is a great way for us to link industry experts, peers, customers together to learn how to best elevate your organization's Wi-Fi performance initiatives. But we'll also be diving into an ROI analysis, and this is a great way for us to learn more about the financial aspects of these in addition to the technical aspects as well. So share with your peers, share with your colleagues, and we will drop this registration link in the chat here if you care to register. A little background on 7 Signal. We were established in 2007 in Helsinki, Finland, and we're now located in Cleveland, Ohio. We've hit a lot of major milestones along the way that we're very proud of, especially our 14 patents, which goes to show that the technology you see from 7 Signal, you're only going to see from 7 Signal. A little bit more background as to what makes us so different. If you look at your typical enterprise LAN infrastructure here on the right, you've already got great tools, great technologies installed on the network, giving you really useful feedback, such as your Riverbed, Cisco, Aruba, AppNeta, and more. But we live in a different space, picking up where they leave off, especially with Mobileye, which provides full visibility into the user experience that can be installed on the individual devices themselves, such as your laptops, your mobile phones, your Zebra scanners, your workstation on wheels, etc. And it can be installed on any macOS, Linux, Android, or Windows device as well. To complement that, we also have Sapphire Eye, which are our software-enabled hardware sensors for service level quality and RF visibility. So through this combination, you're really getting a full perspective as to what is occurring in your wireless network environment that you really can't find anywhere else. And additionally, a lot of us are working from home today, so Mobileye provides full visibility into those external home networks as well, because we understand that no matter where you're logging in from, staying connected to your work is mission critical. All right, we're going to move forward here, but before we pass the controls over to Jim, we're going to launch today's trivia question. So let's see how you all do. Can you see this question, Jim?
Sure can.
All right, awesome. What is the new 6 gigahertz band designated for the FCC? All right, I'll give you all a couple more seconds here. And we're going to close this out. And let's see, how did we do, Jim?
So this is the second time we've used this question, and more people got it right. The actual answer is any protocol that follows the band's rules, not the brand's rules, but the FCC's rules for the 6 gigahertz band can use it. It's not just for Wi-Fi or ultra wideband or even 5G new radio, which has support for 6 gigahertz too.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Jim, and thank you to everyone who answered here. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's presentation. So, Jim, I'm going to pass the controls over to you.
Okay, let's bring up presentation. Move these windows around. Okay, so real quick about me, I am the Chief Wireless Officer at 7 Signal and a CWNE, and you can follow me on the socials at those links below. Today, we're talking about Wi-Fi 6E. And so what is Wi-Fi 6E? So Wi-Fi 6E is the marketing term that the Wi-Fi Alliance has assigned to the use of the 802.11ax protocol extended into this new 6 gigahertz unlicensed band. So the reason it's not called Wi-Fi 7 is because we're using the same protocol as Wi-Fi 6, 802.11ax. We're just extending it into new spectrum that was previously unavailable. So Wi-Fi 6 has been around for a while. In the enterprise space, those products have been on the market since 2018. And the 6 gigahertz band here in the US was opened up last year. And now other regulators in other countries are doing the same or in the process of investigating it. So a little cheat sheet there in that table on the left, just to explain, what the branding is, what the protocols are behind them, and what spectrum each of them uses. Wi-Fi 4 and 5, we don't see those terms used very much because this branding was introduced with the release or with the introduction of 802.11ax. That amendment actually has not been ratified yet. We're still waiting on that from the IEEE. But we've already got the APs and clients out in the market today. So just to give you an idea of why this is such a big deal, why this is actually, the biggest, the biggest improvement in Wi-Fi in a generation is have a look at how large that 6 gigahertz band is. In the US, it's 1200 megahertz wide, more than double the available band spectrum that we have today, which is a boon for anything that where capacity is an issue. So when we take that and we marry that with some of the real world benefits of 802.11ax, so in my opinion, what we're really going to get out of 802.11ax is OFDMA, this really amazing ability for multiple clients to transmit at the same time, and the AP to transmit to multiple clients at the same time. Although we're still seeing vendors try to sort that out. I think that'll work better in 6 gigahertz, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. 1024 QAM, that's the new modulation that allows for much higher data rates than previous standards, and then 8 spatial stream APs. A lot of benefits of that. The headline about having 8 spatial streams is now we can do, really high data rates. But what's really going to be helpful from that is the ability to increase receive sensitivity from combining all of those radio chains when we're receiving a signal, and also improve beamforming to improve SNR at clients. Even those that are not, we won't have clients with 8 spatial streams, but they will benefit from APs with that many spatial streams. Now, 802.11ax has other features: target wait time, spatial reuse, BSS coloring. But unfortunately, some of that is optional, and we know that means that support for optional features will be fragmented or non-existent. And in the real world, that means that benefits are pretty limited from those things. So I think these are the 3 things that 802.11ax brings to the table that we will be able to take a lot of advantage of. And when we marry that again with the 6 gigahertz band, and here's a more detailed look at it showing how big it is compared to the spectrum we have today. We've got in 6 gigahertz in the US again, where we have 1200 megahertz of spectrum, 59 20 megahertz wide channels. So that's more than double the 25 channels we have in 5 gigahertz. We also don't have to deal with this DFS requirement we have in 5 gigahertz. So if you look at the 5 gigahertz area of this chart, there's those blue channels, and those are, let me just bring this out. These blue channels have DFS requirements, which requires FCC certification, and that means most consumer APs don't support them. So in residential areas or anywhere there's consumer grade hardware, we might only have those 9 green channels available. And 6 gigahertz, we don't have DFS requirements. We do have a new requirement called AFC, which we'll get into more as we go. But it's a big improvement. So what are the real world use cases, right? So, if you want to boil it down, it's anywhere you look at a Wi-Fi scanner and see something like this, where every channel is in use. There's multiple APs on each channel, and we're really starved for spectrum here. This is just going to be a train wreck for performance. because there's so many clients and APs all operating on the same channels, there's not enough airtime for good performance. There's collisions. It's just going to be a mess. And so high density, large public venues, dense residential areas, especially those that are dominated by consumer APs that don't have access to as much spectrum. Anywhere congestion is a problem, and you know, today primarily our concern when we're designing Wi-Fi networks is capacity. We're trying to get the most capacity we can out of the network. Designing for coverage is easy, but getting the most capacity out of our WLAN is all about, you know, making use of this very scarce resource, the spectrum. And suddenly it's not so scarce anymore, right? We have so much more spectrum we can use to increase overall system performance. And then, you know, I think areas where you might want pretty high throughput, you know, if you really need more than 20 megabits per second of real application throughput to a client, then Wi-Fi 6E is going to be a big help. I'd be careful though, just to investigate what the real application requirements are of the applications you have to support, because I think there's a lot of marketing that's kind of bogus around Wi-Fi and some of the use cases that Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E, you know, will address. A lot of times we're quoted numbers about 4K and 8K video streaming that are actually derived from uncompressed video. Once you compress, you know, a 4K video stream, you can get it down in the 10 to 20 megabits per second range, and you can do that with 802.11n. So, you know, make sure there's a reality check. I also think AR and VR, you know, the lucky winner of our Oculus VR headset, it's going to work without Wi-Fi 6E. So, you know, maybe future generations, more advanced versions will need a lot more wireless throughput. And I would suggest that WiGig or 802.11ay might be a better solution for that than Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E. I also don't think IoT is a great use case for Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E, just because the clients have to support so many advanced features that are really designed for high throughput clients that, you know, are kind of a waste of money on IoT devices. And if you're deploying IoT devices at scale, you don't want to be spending a lot of money on 802.11ax radio features that won't ever be used. I think there's better protocols for IoT, but that's a different story. You know, what's the outlook with Wi-Fi 6E specifically? You know, what's out there and what's coming next? So first of all, we already have consumer Wi-Fi 6E clients available. So the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra was recently released, and that has a Wi-Fi 6E chipset from Qualcomm in it. The iPhone 13 we can expect to come out at the end of this year, which is typical for Apple's release cycles. And you know, my own personal feeling is that it will support Wi-Fi 6E. Certainly curious if what others think. So drop that in the Q&A panel if you have some insight there. We will see enterprise Wi-Fi 6E access points in the second half of this year. What's interesting is you may already have clients ready and waiting in the enterprise for you to deploy those Wi-Fi 6E APs. It's in this case, you know, the standout one is the Intel AX210 chipset, which was released actually last year and supports Wi-Fi 6E. So depending on your client refresh cycles, you may already have these devices out there just ready and waiting for APs to connect to. And also, this is a very good time to talk to procurement or your device, the guys that manage and own the laptops and desktops that ride on the network, and encourage them to, hey, if there's a hardware refresh cycle coming soon, let's see about getting a Wi-Fi 6E chipset in these boxes that we're going to support for the next 3 or 4 years, because this is coming soon, and it's really going to be a benefit to any clients that can support it. Considerations. Putting on my hat of predictions and what we need to be thinking about in the enterprise for this new hardware, I think Wi-Fi 6E access points are going to come with some sticker shock. Part of that reason is certainly historical. When dual band APs and clients were first released with 5 gigahertz support, they were so much more expensive than what we had before. Additionally, we're looking at probably having a third radio to support 6 gigahertz in the access point. So we would need a radio for 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz. And those 5 and 6 gigahertz radios can have up to 8 spatial streams. So if you also have a 2.4 gigahertz radio with 4 spatial streams, you've got 20 radio chains in a single access point. That's an incredible amount of radio technology packed into a single AP, something we haven't really seen before. All 3 radios will support this very fast 802.11ax modulation, which will require very fast CPU and a lot of memory to keep up with all that. So that all adds up to a pretty significant increase in cost over what we have today. Something else to consider, are your switches up for the job of supporting these new massive access points? Also, is your cabling up for the job? So I think a 3 radio, 20 radio chain access point is probably going to require 802.3 BT PoE, also known as PoE++, and that's the standard that can deliver 60 watts or more of power to an access point. I think we're past what is possible with 30 watts and 802.3 AT. These APs will come with multi-gigabit Ethernet uplinks that support 2.5 and 5 gigabit Ethernet, and maybe we'll see 10 gig Ethernet, although I think that's so expensive and probably not needed. But these are things that you need to be thinking about. Do you have Cat 5e in your buildings? And what does that look like with 60 watts of PoE flowing through each cable? If they're bundled together, you could have some serious heat buildup issues. Really good webinar we did previously with Devin Aiken to look into these kind of issues, and I would encourage you to look at that on our YouTube channel. Potentially a forklift of your switches to support this. And I think we'll see multiple radio configurations. So the obvious one is that 3 radio AP we've been discussing. I think there's a place for a dual radio access point as well. So I would really love to see, that 3 radio tri-band access point, and also a companion access point that just has 2 radios that you can switch, one between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, the other between 5 and 6 gigahertz. The reason for that is if you could use both of those model APs in the same design, you wouldn't end up with any wasted 2.4 gigahertz radios. So the way we design today is we use dual band radios, dual band APs rather, in our designs. And if we're designing with high density capacity requirements, we turn off half or more of those 2.4 gigahertz radios because they're just creating congestion, and their coverage cells are so much bigger than what we have at 5 gigahertz. We don't need all those radios there. So if we had if we were designing for 5 and 6 gigahertz, we could have a tri-radio AP in those areas we need 2.4 gigahertz coverage, and then a 2-radio AP in the areas where we don't, and still have blanket coverage on all 3 bands. That dual radio AP, may get away with, less onerous PoE and switching requirements as well. So things to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind with every new Wi-Fi technology, there are always bugs. Always. It's just a fact of life, unfortunately, in this industry. It takes time for the hardware, once it's released, to have stable code that's really ready for production. Often the hardware comes out the door before the code is really ready to live up to your expectations. And sometimes, we've certainly seen this with previous generations of Wi-Fi, where the AP vendors will, design a new AP, say for 802.11ac, as fast as possible to get it out the door to address that demand in the market, so they can say, yes, we have an 802.11ac AP we can sell to you. And then, they will go back and iterate on the design and come up with a second generation 802.11ac AP that might be a little bit better in terms of overall quality and performance, and have a longer lifespan in terms of support. So you just need to make sure you're on the the right side of things there in terms of what makes sense for you and what your risk appetite is. Okay, so now we're going to get into some technical protocol differences with Wi-Fi 6E in particular. So comparing Wi-Fi 6, 802.11ax and 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and Wi-Fi 6E and 6 gigahertz, there are some interesting technical differences. So, in Wi-Fi 6, we still have those DFS rules in the 5 gigahertz band that are hard to deal with. In Wi-Fi 6E, we have a brand new system called AFC, Automatic Frequency Coordination, and that only applies to access points used in outdoors with high power and with external antennas. So in most indoor use cases, we don't even have to worry about it. Big differences in security though. Wi-Fi 6, we had actually all the same security available that we had before, WPA2, and we could just do open security, which is really no security, just an open SSID, no authentication, no encryption. And Wi-Fi 6E, we are limited now to WPA3 only and opportunistic wireless encryption only. I believe the Wi-Fi Alliance calls that Wi-Fi enhanced open. So sometimes you hear OWE, sometimes you hear enhanced open, they're the same thing. But what that means is in the 6 gigahertz band, all of our data traffic will be encrypted. You'll never see unencrypted over-the-air traffic in the 6 gigahertz band. But think about what that means for SSIDs that span the legacy bands and the 6 gigahertz bands. How will we be able to support our legacy clients that don't support these new security suites, and our new clients in the 6 gigahertz band that only support these new security suites when they're operating at 6 gigahertz? Channel widths are different in Wi-Fi 6. We could go up to 160 megahertz channel widths. In the 6 gigahertz band, it appears that we're limited to 80 and 160 megahertz channel widths in terms of operating at the AP. Clients can use a 20 megahertz only mode that's supported in 802.11ax, but it looks like APs must support 80 megahertz wide channels or greater. In Wi-Fi 6, we have to use request to send, clear to send protection, particularly when we're using newer features for backwards compatibility, and we actually don't need that at all in Wi-Fi 6E, and I'll talk more about that in a few slides here. AP discovery in Wi-Fi 6 is just like it always was before. We're actively and passively scanning on all channels to discover APs in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz band. 6 gigahertz is very different. So we have 59 channels that clients have to do AP discovery on. And so what the IEEE has done is said, actually, no, if there are just 14 preferred scanning channels that your APs should be operating on, or at least transmitting a frame that they can be discovered with on. And clients only need to scan those 14 preferred scanning channels, or PSCs. The other thing a client can do actually is discover a 6 gigahertz radio from the beacon frame of an AP that is also operating in 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. So really simple but very effective. A client could scan the 5 gigahertz band. It hears a beacon frame on the from an AP on a channel, and within that beacon is an information element that says, hey, I also have a radio on this channel in 6 gigahertz. So if the client wants to go to 6 gigahertz, it knows exactly what channel to look at first. So AP discovery becomes more complicated now. I want to talk a little bit about spectrum rules. This is specific, again, to what the FCC in the United States has decided. And you might have different rules depending on the regulator that makes the rules for the band where you are. But here in the US, the AFC requirement almost never applies indoors. It would only apply indoors if you're using external antennas, or you want to go above 18 dBm of transmit power in a 20 megahertz wide channel. And actually that limit increases as you go to wider channels. So most of the time we don't have to worry about AFC. We can stand up our typical indoor omnidirectional and APs and use the whole band without any extra considerations. It's really, really awesome. If we do have special use cases where we need more transmit power or external antennas, or we want to operate outside, that's when AFC comes into play. But AFC is very different from DFS, and I'm going to explain that here in just a moment. Other things the FCC has decided about the 6 gigahertz band is we can't blind probe like we do in the other bands. And if a client can't just show up on the channel and transmit a probe request without first hearing a transmission from an AP. Once it hears an AP transmit, it can send a probe request. And also, we can't use the 6 gigahertz band in the US for mobile hotspots. It can only be used on APs that are in a fixed location and are not battery powered. So real quick on AFC, because this is something new to Wi-Fi, but it's actually a framework that we've already had before. I think it first came about with 802.11af. That is 802.11af in the TV white space band. And now we've seen a similar framework get use in the CBRS band, the SAS, the Spectrum Access System, operates very similar to what we're going to do with AFC. But the idea of AFC is removing the requirement of an access point to discover incumbents like radar, or in the 5 gigahertz band. In 6 gigahertz, the incumbents are fixed point-to-point wireless operators that have licensed and exclusive access to certain channels in certain places around the country. So instead of having the access points try to listen and determine if an incumbent is there, like we do with DFS, which is really messy and hard to get right, we actually have a centralized system called the AFC. And what happens is the controller or the access point, once a day, I believe, queries the AFC, and this is only if AFC is required, otherwise we don't go through all this, to see, hey, what channels are available. It tells the AFC where it is, where it's located, and the AFC then takes that spectrum request, queries the FCC's license database, and builds an RF model of what the incumbent use of the spectrum in the area that the access point is, what that looks like, right? And then based on what we're getting from the FCC ULS database and the AFC's RF modeling, it returns a list of channels that are free for the access point to use. So this is a huge improvement over DFS. We have certainty about what channels we can use, really for the first time. In DFS, there's a ton of uncertainty. We can set up APs to test channels and see if we're getting a lot of hits. But what happens in the future is anybody's guess. And in 5 gigahertz, some of those incumbents are military aircraft that could fly over and disrupt your whole WLAN kind of out of the blue that you'd never seen before. We also have problems with false positives in DFS radar detection. It's very hard for an access point to do that effectively. And again, most of the time we don't even have to worry about it. So this is all good news. Okay, so I want to talk about but besides the obvious benefits of having more spectrum, we can use wider channels, we have less contention, less co-channel interference. I think there's additional potential for spectral efficiency gains over 802.11ax or Wi-Fi 6 in 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. First of all, what we want to accomplish for the most spectral efficiency is multi-user operation. And in the legacy bands, well, first of all, for that to happen, the access point has to win a TX op. In the legacy bands, it contends equally with all the other stations on the channel to win that TX op. In 6 gigahertz, that doesn't have to happen. We can change the EDCA parameters, so the AP actually wins the channel more often, which allows for multi-user operation to occur more often. We already mentioned how we need RTS-CTS protection in the legacy bands, and in 6 gigahertz with Wi-Fi 6E, we don't need that, and not just because we don't need it for backwards compatibility, but there's a new field in the high efficiency preamble that declares the TX op. So in 802.11ax, all 802.11ax stations will set their nav timer from the preamble, which is a new capability that we can get the most out of it in 6 gigahertz where we don't have legacy clients. So I think all that adds up to more opportunities for OFDMA in 6 gigahertz versus the legacy bands. I also think spatial reuse, if it gets deployed and supported, has much, has the opportunity to really have the positive benefit that it's designed for. In the legacy bands, it penalizes clients and access points that don't support it by them actually not winning access to the channel as often. So I want to illustrate this just to kind of show what it looks like. So let's see, yeah, there we go. So in a 5 gigahertz channel, the best case, so efficiency, when we've got a lot of throughput or very busy channels, is almost always we're still going to be using single user operation, where one station, one client or AP transmits at a time. The reason for this is we've got these 802.11n and AC clients that don't support OFDMA, of course, and they're going to live forever, I'm afraid, just like older 5s that live forever in 2.4 gigahertz. I think, it'll be a long time before people stop manufacturing 802.11n and AC clients. Even though the new standards are out, those old standards are lower cost and may meet the requirements of the device they're they're being installed in. In 6 gigahertz, we have the potential. This is, again, best case scenario. We have the potential that the AP can win the channel more often, and we can get this really efficient multi-user operation going on, where the AP wins the channel. We don't bother with RTS CTS because we declare the TX op in the high efficiency preamble, and we go straight into downlink OFDMA followed by a multi-user block ACK. That's still multi-user operation. Again, the AP wins the channel. We do it again, and then once we the AP is aware of buffered traffic at the stations, at the clients, which it's learning about, and I believe in those block ACKs, they get the AP gets a buffer status report. Then it can send a trigger frame, and all the uplink traffic from the clients that are associated can be transmitted at the same time as well. So, the best case scenario, I'm hopeful that, the promise of OFDMA, which we haven't really realized in 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz, we'll be able to experience much more often in the 6 gigahertz band. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay, well, that just about wraps up my presentation. Kelsey, I think we can jump into some Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. We've gotten a lot of great questions throughout the presentation, so we will try to hit as many as we can in our time left together. So our first question here is from Lee, and he says, Wi-Fi 6 has arguably been a bust with almost all AP features needing to be disabled because of client driver incompatibility. Any optimism on that being better with 6E?
Yeah, Lee, I agree. It has been disappointing. We even have seen AP vendors at times say, just toggle off that Wi-Fi 6, toggle until this stuff gets sorted out. I share your pessimism. 802.11ax introduces an incredible amount of complexity that we've never had in Wi-Fi before, and it's unclear if we'll be able to really get this sorted out and get everybody kind of worked through all those compatibility issues. It's been 3 years, right? And we're still dealing with this. So, time will tell. I think, 6E has a lot more potential than the legacy bands, but you do bring up an important point about client capabilities and client compatibility in terms of if all of that will be realized.
Thanks, Lee. Our next question is from Chris here, and he says, for any client devices being upgraded to 6E, wouldn't that also require an antenna upgrade, or would 6E continue to the existing 5 gigahertz antennas?
Yeah, so it will require new hardware. So you need a new chipset, and the antenna specifically, that's an interesting question because there's not much spectrum between the top end of the 5 gigahertz spectrum, Uni 3 and I want to say Uni 5 is the bottom of 6 gigahertz, are pretty close together. So potentially the same antenna could be used, but often those are, the chipset itself will have to be upgraded, of course, to support the band.
All right, thank you, Chris. We have another question here. Let's scroll up here. Let's see. Where did this go? Okay, there we go. From David, he says, Jim, I recently read that 5 gigahertz wireless may have some impact on the client's ability to see/use 6 gigahertz wireless. Can you elaborate more?
Yeah, that's a good question, David. So one of the ways 5 gigahertz will affect 6 gigahertz is that you can use the 5 gigahertz band for AP discovery in the 6 gigahertz band. So that ability for a 5 gigahertz AP to include an information element that advertises the channel it's operating in 6 gigahertz is how that would happen. So a client could scan all of 5 gigahertz and discover all the 5 gig radios and 6 gig radios at the same time, so that it can zero in on the correct channels to scan in 6 gigahertz if it's looking for an AP there. But the standard will also support a 6 gigahertz only operation mode, and that's where those preferred scanning channels come into play. But also, hope that most clients operating in a swath of spectrum that big are going to support 802.11k. So finding that first AP might take some time, but after that, you've got a very pared down list from neighbor reports and 802.11k of channels to scan to look for the next AP.
All right, thank you. Another question here, and Jim, this might be our last one that we have time for.
Sure.
We have, how does a WLC/AP know where it's located in order to pass that location information onto the AFC service? Is this an honor system that lets the admin of the WLC/AP specify the device's location?
Yeah, very good question. In CBRS, it is not an honor system. The AP the base station either uses GPS or there's a CPI that certifies the location information. That's a licensed installer that puts their name on the location info that's submitted to the SAS. I'm not sure if that has been worked out yet in AFC, how that's going to happen for us in Wi-Fi. But I would refer you to the FCC's NPRM from April, where that ruling may, where there may be more details on exactly how that's going to happen.
All right. Thank you to everyone for dropping in your questions there. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. And thank you, Jim, for answering those and for really diving into this great presentation today. We love hearing from all of you. We love having you on every Wednesday, and really appreciate you being here today and giving us 47 minutes out of your work day. So thanks, everyone, and we hope to see you next week at our virtual user group. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Kelsey. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.